What kind of country hides rainbow-colored rivers beneath some of the densest jungles on Earth? A place where entire cities dance until sunrise while Caribbean waves crash against streets painted in impossible colors. This is Colombia. For decades, the world looked at this land and saw only one thing: danger. But what if that was never the full story? Beyond the headlines lies one of the most geographically insane and culturally alive places on the planet. Colombia doesn't feel like a single country. It feels like several different worlds colliding at once. Caño Cristales. Hidden deep within the Serranía de la Macarena, an isolated river cuts relentlessly through the Colombian jungle. For most of the year, Caño Cristales behaves like any other ordinary tributary. But during a brief, highly specific transition between the wet and dry seasons, the environment shifts. The water level drops just enough to let the intense equatorial sun strike the riverbed. Just as the landscape feels entirely predictable, the geography activates a startling biological response. A highly specialized aquatic plant, Macarena clavigera, reacts to this exact exposure, transforming the rocky gorge into a sweeping current of brilliant crimson, magenta, and ochres. For a few fleeting weeks, the river doesn't just flow through the jungle. It outshines it. It becomes a vivid, breathing entity, born from the perfect temporary collision of geology, water, and light. The Caribbean Sea. The Caribbean Sea feels like Colombia, at its most seductive. The water here shifts between impossible shades of turquoise and deep sapphire, while warm ocean winds carry the sounds of salsa street vendors and distant boat engines across the coast. But this isn't the quiet, polished Caribbean you might expect. Colombia's Caribbean is loud, colorful, chaotic, and intensely alive. Along the shoreline, fishing villages sit beside colonial cities, bursting with music and heat, while tiny tropical islands seem to float untouched in the middle of the sea. Beneath the surface lies another world, entirely with coral reefs, shipwrecks, and some of the richest marine ecosystems in South America. For centuries, these waters attracted pirates, merchants, and empires fighting for control of the region. Today, the Caribbean Sea remains the beating heart of northern Colombia, shaping its culture, rhythm, food, and unmistakable energy in ways you can feel almost instantly. San Andres. At first glance, San Andres doesn't even look real. Surrounded by what locals call the Sea of Seven Colors, this tiny Caribbean island is wrapped in layers of water so vividly blue and green that it almost resembles a digital rendering rather than nature itself. But beyond the postcard, beauty lies one of the most culturally unique places in Colombia. Located closer to Nicaragua than mainland Colombia, San Andres feels completely different from the rest of the country. English Creole reggae music, Caribbean cuisine, and Afro-Caribbean traditions shape everyday life here, creating an atmosphere that feels more Jamaican than South American. The island moves at its own rhythm. Golf carts replace traffic beach bars, pulse with music late into the night, and the scent of fried fish and coconut rice drifts through the humid ocean air. Yet the true magic of San Andres appears beneath the surface. Coral gardens, stingrays, sea turtles, and crystal clear reefs make these waters some of the most spectacular in the Caribbean. Standing on the shore as the sea changes color with the sunlight, you quickly understand why this island has become one of Colombia's greatest tropical escapes. Cartagena. Cartagena feels less like a city and more like a fever dream trapped between centuries. Behind massive stone walls built to defend against pirates and invading empires lies a maze of narrow colonial streets, overflowing with color music and tropical heat. Balconies draped in bright flowers hang above cobblestone alleyways, while horse-drawn carriages roll past churches and plazas that have barely changed in hundreds of years. Every corner feels cinematic, as if the city was designed specifically to be filmed at sunset. But Cartagena's beauty comes with layers of history that still linger beneath the surface. This was once one of the most important ports in the Spanish Empire, a place where gold-enslaved people and enormous wealth flowed through the Caribbean. You can still feel traces of that power in the towering fortresses overlooking the sea, especially Castillo San Felipe, the massive stronghold that protected the city from constant attacks. Yet modern Cartagena is anything but frozen in time. Outside the old city walls, salsa music spills from crowded streets, rooftop bars glow above the skyline, and the Caribbean energy becomes impossible to ignore. Cartagena doesn't quietly charm you. It completely consumes your senses. Guatapé and the Rock of Guatapé. Few places in Colombia look as surreal as Guatapé. From above, the landscape resembles a giant flooded labyrinth where endless green islands and twisting waterways spread across the mountains like shattered pieces of glass. At the center of it all rises one of the strangest natural landmarks in South America, the Rock of Guatapé. Known locally as El Peñol, this enormous granite monolith erupts almost vertically from the earth, towering more than 200 meters above the surrounding lakes. Scientists still debate exactly how this colossal formation was created, but standing beneath it feels like looking at something ancient and almost unnatural. To reach the summit, visitors must climb over 700 steep steps, built directly into a narrow crack running along the side of the rock. The higher you climb, the more unreal the scenery becomes. At the top, the entire Antioquia region unfolds beneath you in every direction. A breathtaking patchwork of shimmering water-forested hills and tiny islands disappearing into the horizon. It's one of those rare views that genuinely makes people stop talking. But Guatapé itself is just as memorable as the rock. The town bursts with color in a way that almost feels exaggerated. Nearly every building is painted in vivid blues, reds, yellows, and greens, while decorative panels called zócalos cover the lower walls, each one telling small stories about local culture and history. Combined with the peaceful lakes, mountain air, and constant sense of energy, Guatapé feels less like a normal town and more like Colombia showing off. Rosario Islands. Just off the coast of Cartagena lies a tropical world that feels completely disconnected from the noise and intensity of mainland Colombia. The Rosario Islands are a chain of small coral islands scattered across the Caribbean Sea, surrounded by water so clear and brightly colored that boats appear to float in midair. This is one of the most important marine ecosystems in the country, and part of a protected national park designed to preserve the fragile coral reefs beneath the surface. But what makes the Rosario Islands unforgettable is the atmosphere. There are no giant cities here, no towering hotels dominating the coastline. Instead, you find quiet beaches lined with palm trees, hidden wooden docks, and small islands where life moves slowly beneath the heat of the Caribbean sun. Beneath the water, the reefs are alive with tropical fish, sea urchins, and coral gardens that make snorkeling here feel like entering another planet. Yet despite the peaceful scenery, these islands once served as hideouts for pirates and smugglers navigating the Caribbean trade routes centuries ago. Today, the Rosario Islands offer something entirely different escapee. It's the kind of place where time seems to dissolve into salt air ocean waves and endless shades of blue stretching toward the horizon. Tatacoa Desert. At first glance, the Tatacoa Desert barely looks like Colombia at all. When most people imagine this country, they picture dense jungles, tropical beaches, and endless green mountains. But hidden deep within the Huila region lies a landscape so dry, silent, and alien that it feels closer to the surface of Mars than South America. Despite its name, Tatacoa is technically not a true desert, but a tropical dry forest that has been slowly sculpted for millions of years by erosion, extreme heat, and powerful winds into one of the strangest environments in the country. Massive red canyons twist across the horizon like frozen rivers of stone, while endless labyrinths of cracked earth and jagged cliffs create scenery that feels almost post-apocalyptic. Walking through Tatacoa can feel disorienting in the best possible way. One moment, you are surrounded by deep crimson rock formations, glowing beneath the sunlight, and only minutes later, the landscape transforms into pale gray valleys that resemble the surface of another planet entirely. There are very few trees here, almost no sound except the wind, and a silence so intense that it becomes part of the experience itself. The desert also hides evidence of a completely different past. Millions of years ago, this region was covered by lush tropical forests, filled with enormous animals and prehistoric life. Fossils discovered here reveal that Tatacoa was once one of the richest ecosystems in South America, before nature reshaped it into the barren terrain seen today. But the true magic begins after sunset. Far away from major cities and artificial light, the night sky over Tatacoa becomes unbelievably clear. Thousands of stars ignite above the desert with stunning intensity, while the Milky Way stretches across the darkness in extraordinary detail. Standing alone beneath that sky, surrounded by ancient rock and complete silence, Tatacoa no longer feels like part of Earth. It feels like stepping into another world, hidden inside Colombia. Salento. Hidden within Colombia's lush coffee region, Salento feels like the kind of mountain town travelers spend years trying to find. Brightly painted colonial houses line the narrow streets. Old jeeps rumble through the town square, and the scent of fresh coffee drifts constantly through the cool Andean air. Life moves slower here, surrounded by green hills and cloud-covered mountains that make the entire region feel peaceful and almost dreamlike. But the true symbol of Salento rises just beyond the town itself. Towering high above the valley are the famous wax palms of Cocora Valley, the tallest palm trees on Earth. Some reach over 60 meters into the mist, creating one of the most surreal landscapes in South America. Standing beneath them, feels strange, almost impossible, as if giant palm trees were somehow planted in the middle of a Jurassic-era mountain wilderness. The surrounding hills are also home to some of Colombia's finest coffee farms, where generations of farmers still harvest beans by hand on steep mountain slopes. Here, coffee is not simply a drink. It is part of the culture, the economy, and everyday life itself. Between the endless greenery, cool mountain weather, and the surreal beauty of Cocora Valley, Salento captures a softer and more peaceful side of Colombia that feels completely unforgettable. Santa Marta. Santa Marta is one of those rare places where the Caribbean Sea and towering mountains collide almost violently. At first glance, it feels like a classic, tropical coastal city, filled with palm trees, colorful streets, seafood markets, and humid ocean air. But just beyond the beaches rises something extraordinary. Looming over the coastline is the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, the highest coastal mountain range on Earth, where snow-covered peaks climb to nearly 5,700 meters, only a short distance from the Caribbean Sea. Few places on the planet contain such extreme geography packed so closely together. Founded in 1525, Santa Marta is also the oldest surviving Spanish city in Colombia. Centuries of history still echo through its colonial center, where old churches and whitewashed buildings stand beneath the intense tropical heat. Yet the city itself is often only the beginning of the journey. Santa Marta serves as the gateway to some of Colombia's most spectacular natural landscapes. Just outside the city lies Tayrona National Park, where dense jungle spills directly onto untouched Caribbean beaches. Monkeys swing through the trees above hiking trails, while enormous waves crash against giant volcanic rocks along the shorelines. Further into the mountains, hidden deep within the jungle, lies the legendary Lost City, an ancient civilization built centuries before Machu Picchu and accessible only through a demanding multi-day trek. What makes Santa Marta so captivating is the constant contrast. Within a single day, you can stand beside the Caribbean under suffocating tropical heat, and then look upward toward mountains covered in clouds and snow. It's a place where Colombia's geography feels almost unreal, compressed into one breathtaking corner of the country. Parque del Café. Parque del Café is where Colombia transforms its most famous product into an entire cultural experience. Located in the heart of the coffee region, this theme park blends roller coasters, traditional architecture, live performances, and lush coffee plantations into one surprisingly beautiful destination. But beyond the attractions, the park celebrates the generations of farmers who helped shape Colombia's global identity through coffee production. As cable cars glide above green hills covered in coffee plants, visitors can see just how deeply coffee is woven into the landscape and culture of the country. It's colorful, energetic, and uniquely Colombian in a way few places manage to capture. Zipaquira Salt Cathedral. Hidden nearly 200 meters beneath the earth, the Salt Cathedral of Zipaquira feels less like a church and more like an underground world carved out of darkness and stone. Built inside the tunnels of an active salt mine, this extraordinary cathedral is considered one of Colombia's greatest architectural wonders. As you descend deeper underground, the air becomes cooler, and the walls begin to glow with soft blue and purple lights, reflecting against massive chambers carved entirely from salt. What makes this place so surreal is its scale. Giant crosses emerge directly from the rock. Long tunnels lead into enormous cathedral halls, and the silence underground creates an atmosphere that feels both peaceful and mysterious. Long before the Spanish arrived, indigenous Muiscan communities considered salt a sacred resource and one of the foundations of their civilization. Today, Zipaquira transforms that ancient history into something unforgettable, blending engineering, spirituality, and geology into one of the most unique experiences in Colombia. Rocas de Suesca. Just outside Bogota, the towering cliffs of Rocas de Suesca rise dramatically above the surrounding countryside, like a natural stone wall stretching across the Andes. For decades, this rugged landscape has been considered the birthplace of rock climbing in Colombia, attracting climbers from around the world to its steep sandstone formations. But even for non-climbers, Suesca feels impressive. The cliffs glow golden beneath the afternoon sunlight, while cold mountain winds sweep across the valley below. Combined with nearby caves, railway tunnels, and dramatic Andean scenery, Rocas de Suesca offers a raw and adventurous side of Colombia, far removed from the tropical Caribbean image most travelers expect. Tintipan Island. Tiny, isolated, and surrounded by impossibly clear Caribbean water, Tintipan Island feels like the definition of escape. Part of the San Bernardo archipelago off Colombia's northern coast, this small tropical island is known for its quiet beaches, swaying palm trees, and peaceful atmosphere, far removed from the noise of major tourist destinations. There are no massive resorts or crowded city streets here. Instead, wooden piers stretch into turquoise water, while small fishing boats drift slowly across the sea beneath the Caribbean suns. But Tintipan's beauty is not only above the surface. The surrounding coral reefs are filled with colorful marine life, making the island one of the best places in Colombia for snorkeling and diving. As daylight fades, the sea becomes even more magical. Nearby, bioluminescent plankton can cause the water to glow softly at night, creating an almost unreal scene that feels more like fantasy than nature. Fe de Antioquia. Santa Fe de Antioquia feels like stepping directly into Colombia's colonial past. Once the most important city in the Antioquia region, this historic town sits beneath the intense tropical heat of the surrounding valleys, where whitewashed buildings, cobblestone streets, and centuries-old churches have remained remarkably preserved. Unlike Colombia's larger cities, filled with traffic and modern skyscrapers, Santa Fe moves at a slower and quieter rhythm. Horse-drawn carriages still pass through the streets. Locals gather in shaded plazas beneath palm trees, and the sound of church bells echoes through the warm afternoon air. Founded in the 16th century, during the Spanish colonial era, the town became wealthy through gold trading and played a major role in shaping the region's history. That legacy can still be seen in its grand cathedrals, colonial mansions, and elegant courtyards hidden behind heavy wooden doors. Just outside the town stands one of its most famous landmarks, the Puente de Occidente, a massive suspension bridge stretching across the Cauca River. Built in the 19th century, it was once considered one of the greatest engineering achievements in South America. Calima Lake. Surrounded by rolling green mountains and powerful winds, Calima Lake has become one of the most important adventure destinations in Colombia. Located in the Valle del Cauca region, this enormous artificial lake is famous for having some of the strongest and most consistent winds in South America, attracting wind surfers and kite surfers from around the world. But beyond the adrenaline, Calima also feels peaceful. Mist often hangs above the water in the early morning, while the surrounding hills create a calm and almost cinematic atmosphere. Combined with cool weather lakeside cabins and endless mountain scenery, Calima offers a completely different side of Colombia's natural beauty. Bogota City. High in the Andes Mountains at over 2,600 meters above sea level, Bogota feels massive, chaotic, intellectual, and intensely alive all at once. As the capital of Colombia, this city is often the first impression travelers have of the country, and it immediately challenges expectations. Beneath the cold mountain air and modern skyline lies a place shaped by centuries of history, political struggle, art, and cultural transformations. In the historic district of La Candelaria, narrow colonial streets wind past colorful houses, old churches, street murals, and crowded cafes filled with students and artists. Just above the city rises Monserrate, the iconic mountain overlooking Bogota, where the sprawling urban landscape stretches endlessly beneath the clouds. It's from here that you truly realize the sheer scale of the Colombian capital. But Bogota's energy comes from more than its landmarks. This is a city where luxury restaurants exist beside chaotic street markets, where modern business districts collide with colonial architecture, and where music, protest, fashion, and creativity constantly spill into public life. Bogota doesn't try to appear polished or perfect. Instead, it feels raw, fast-moving, and authentic. For many travelers, it becomes the place where they first understand that Colombia is far more complex, modern, and culturally rich than the outside world often assumes. Tayrona National Park. Tayrona National Park feels like one of the last truly wild coastlines left in the Caribbean. Here, dense tropical jungle spills directly onto untouched beaches. Enormous volcanic boulders rise from the sand like ancient ruins, and the sound of crashing waves echoes constantly through the humid air. Located along Colombia's northern coast, near Santa Marta, Tayrona, is where the raw power of nature completely takes over. Unlike many tropical destinations built around resorts and nightlife, Tayrona feels untamed. Reaching some of its most beautiful beaches requires long hikes through thick rainforest trails, filled with monkeys, tropical birds, and hidden wildlife moving through the canopy above. The heat can feel intense, the jungle dense and overwhelming, but that effort is exactly what makes the experience unforgettable. Every trail eventually opens onto scenery that looks almost impossibly cinematic. But Tayrona is more than just a national park. For indigenous communities such as the Kogi people, this land is considered sacred and deeply connected to the spiritual balance of nature. Even today, parts of the park remain protected and inaccessible in order to preserve that connection. What makes Tayrona so captivating is the contrast between peace and danger. The beaches may appear calm and inviting, yet powerful currents beneath the surface can become extremely dangerous within seconds. Nature here is breathtakingly beautiful. but it constantly reminds you that it is still in control. That balance gives Tayrona a wild energy few Caribbean destinations still possess. Palomino. Palomino feels like the edge of two completely different worlds colliding. On one side, the endless Caribbean Sea stretches toward the horizon beneath burning tropical sunsets. On the other, the enormous Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountains rise dramatically into the clouds, their distant snow-covered peaks visible from the coastline on clear days. Few places in Colombia combine jungle rivers, mountains, and ocean so closely together, and that contrast gives Palomino an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in the country. What was once a quiet fishing village has slowly transformed into one of Colombia's most beloved backpacker destinations. Yet it still feels surprisingly raw and untamed. Dirt roads cut through the town. Reggae music drifts from small beach bars, and the humid air constantly carries the scent of saltwater smoke and tropical vegetations. Life here moves slowly. People come to disconnect from cities, spend hours watching the waves, and disappear into the rhythm of the Caribbean coast. But the true experience of Palomino begins beyond the beach itself. One of the most famous activities here is tubing down the Palomino River, where visitors float through dense jungle while enormous mountains tower silently in the distance. Along the riverbanks, tropical birds move through the trees, while indigenous communities continue living in the surrounding regions, much as they have for generations. At night, Palomino transforms completely. Bonfires flicker along the beach, music echoes through the darkness, and the sky fills with stars above the sound of crashing waves. It's the kind of place where time begins to feel irrelevant. Wild, relaxed, and deeply connected to nature. Palomino captures the free-spirited side of Colombia better than almost anywhere else. Jericho. Hidden deep within the green mountains of Antioquia, Jericho feels like one of Colombia's best-kept secrets. Colorful colonial buildings climb steep hillsides, Narrow streets wind through the town, beneath hanging flower baskets, and the surrounding mountains disappear endlessly into layers of mist. Everything here feels calm, traditional, and deeply connected to the rhythms of rural Colombian life. Unlike larger tourist destinations filled with noise and crowds, Jericho moves slowly. Locals gather in quiet plazas. Farmers ride through the streets on horseback, and small cafes serve rich Colombian coffee, beside bakeries that have existed for generations. The town is also known for its strong religious history and beautifully preserved churches, giving Jericho an atmosphere that feels both peaceful and timeless. But what truly defines Jericho is the landscape surrounding it. Endless green valleys, waterfalls, and cloud-covered mountains make the region feel almost cinematic. Hiking trails lead into forests filled with birds and hidden viewpoints overlooking the Antioquian countryside. It's also one of the best places in Colombia to see the rare Andean cock of the rock, one of South America's most striking birds. Jericho doesn't overwhelm visitors with giant landmarks or dramatic attractions. Instead, its beauty comes from simplicity, authenticity, and the feeling that life here has remained beautifully untouched by the modern world. Playa Blanca. With its powder white sand and glowing turquoise water, Playa Blanca looks almost exactly like the Caribbean fantasy people imagine when they think of tropical Colombia. Located along the coast near Cartagena, this beach has become famous for its shallow, crystal-clear sea. Warm weather and intense tropical atmosphere that feels vibrant from sunrise until long after sunset. During the day, the beach is alive with movement. Small boats arrive constantly from Cartagena, carrying travelers eager to escape the city heat, while local vendors walk along the shoreline, selling fresh seafood, tropical fruit, and cold coconut drinks beneath the blazing Caribbean sun. Music drifts through the air, waves roll gently onto the sand, and the entire coastline feels energetic and unmistakably Colombian. But Playa Blanca becomes especially beautiful later in the afternoon when the crowds begin to thin and the sunlight softens across the waters. The sea shifts through shades of blue and green, so vivid they almost appear artificial, while the horizon glows beneath the fading heat of the Caribbean skies. Despite its growing popularity, Playa Blanca still captures the relaxed coastal spirit that defines much of northern Colombia. It's not a place built around silence or luxury. It's loud, colorful, tropical, and alive. The kind of beach where the atmosphere becomes just as memorable as the scenery itself.